Hey, this is Russell out here at Heritage Grove Pecan Farm. It's the first week of April in 2025, and I'm going to cut some graft wood today off of several Kanza trees. I don't really like to do my pruning until I'm ready to cut my grafting wood, because if you do your pruning earlier in the dormant period, and that would be when you do want to prune is when the trees are dormant, like November, December, January, February, March. But I don't like to cut grafting wood too early because it won't keep forever. And if you cut your grafting wood or your scions too soon, then they could rot as you try to hold on to them until it's ready to graft. So one of the other reasons that I want to cut the grafting wood today is because they're calling for some extremely warm weather here in the next few days. It's going to be in the 80s, mid 80s here in Virginia, and we're in the far southern part of Virginia. And what you don't want is you don't want your scions or your grafting wood to start opening the buds. Once your buds open and once the trees begin to push buds and new growth, then you really have missed the window for cutting your graft wood. At least that's been my experience. So I'm going to work on the Kanza trees today. It's one of my favorite varieties. It seems to be fairly easy to graft. And what we'll do is after I cut my grafting wood, I'll do another component and show you how I store that grafting wood. Now, there have been years, and I've had success with this, of actually cutting the scions and then immediately taking that wood that I cut and grafting it onto the host tree or the rootstock within just a matter of minutes from after cutting the grafting wood. So that does work well, but the bark has to be slipping on your rootstock. So I haven't tested that yet, and my main objective for this afternoon is to go ahead and cut my grafting wood. That way I have it. I'll keep it in a cool, dark place so that it will remain dormant until I'm ready to perform my graft. So anyway, stick around here and I'll show you what I'm doing. There's really no magic to collecting the graft wood. You're just going to make your cuts where you need to, and basically any of the grafting material, you need to have 3 or 4 or maybe 5 bud nodes on your graft wood. Now I'm going to cut pieces that are fairly long because I'm doing some pruning as well, and then after I'm through with the cutting the grafting wood, as I mentioned earlier, I'll show you what I do to cut those into smaller pieces and how I package those so they can be stored. So I'm going to go ahead and start making a few cuts where I think they need to be. And again, this is a Kanza tree. This one's about maybe 2 or 3 years old, and I'm also going to prune the tree at the same time, and this is going to reinforce some good growth habits. So here we go. Now, one of the things you also want to try to do is to keep one central leader. You don't want a bunch of forks low on the tree with very difficult angles where branches adjoin the main part of the tree. So I'm pruning, and I'm also trying to make sure that I end up with one central leader. So I did cut back the tops of some of these other branches around the central leader. I don't want them to be competing with that central leader. I want one good central leader, and that'll be the main part of the tree. Now, I realize that it may look like I've really heavily pruned this. I'll come back with some bigger pruning shears because there's more work for me to do here on this tree, but I've only got a small pair of hand shears with me today, or hand pruners. But it's okay to be fairly aggressive during the dormant period to prune your trees. So again, I'm trying to collect graft wood, but I also want to trim off some branches of the tree here so that I reinforce a good growth habit on the tree overall. So another comment I wanted to make about your grafting wood is it's okay for it to be anywhere between about 1/4 of an inch in diameter up to about 1/2 of an inch. And you're going to need a variety of sizes because as you go out in the field to do your grafting, you know, all of the host trees or the root stocks you're going to try to graft, they're not going to be the same diameter or the same thickness. So I'll have some smaller ones here that I'll work with, and I'll also have some larger ones here that I work with. And that way when I've carried my supplies out into the field, I've got an assortment of different sizes so I can find the right one to fit the root stock. You also want to be careful as you handle the scions because they've got buds on here and it might be too small to see on the camera, but you don't want to break or damage these little buds, okay, because that's where your new growth is going to come from. It's going to come from one of these bud nodes that you see here. So if you break all those off because of handling your material in a way that's rough, then you're going to really make it hard for your grafting to be successful. Okay, we've just moved to a different tree in the orchard, but we're still going to be pruning Kanza. As I'm doing my work this evening, it's a cloudy day, it's late in the day. I was working on another project earlier, but again, with warm weather coming, I want to go ahead and get my collection of grafting wood done. I'm just using a small pair of hand pruners. These are called Felco, and I've had these for some time, but they work great. I've got 2 or 3 pair of these, and for the most part, for most of your smaller purposes and for collecting graft wood, this is all you need. I also have a 5-gallon bucket with me, so as I cut my grafting wood, I'm putting it over here in the bucket. But I'm going to go ahead and make a few cuts on this tree, and we'll collect that graft wood as well. Now, this tree really has a really bad angle with this lateral branch here, and I do not want this to continue to grow. I want one nice straight central leader. So the pruners I have are fairly small, and I'm not sure if they will take this off right here, but I'm going to give it a try, and that way you can see when I talk about having a bad angle, they call this a bad crotch angle. In the winter or in a thunderstorm or heavy wind, this will split out right here, and this part will break off, and you can really damage the tree by doing that. So let's see if I can take this off right now. Okay, that was successful, and I may come back with a hand saw or a larger pair of shears and just to get that little knob off right there. Again, the object of the game is to have a nice straight central leader, and I really don't want a bunch of lateral branches until I get about 5 feet off the ground, maybe even 6, and that helps me take my zero turn mower and mow under the tree without damaging branches and without damaging myself at the same time. Okay, so I want you to see that this is a Gloria Grand variety, and I planted this in 2011, so it's had at least 14 growing seasons. But I'll show you what I mean when I talk about leaving enough ground clearance from the soil to the first group of branches that are lateral branches on the tree. Again, you want to try to leave some space so you can safely work around the tree, and if you're mowing, again, it helps you avoid hazards. Plus, if you have a mower with rollover protection, which I do, if that roll bar catches on some of the lower branches, you can break the branches off, or you can run the risk of flipping the mower over on top of yourself. Both of those are bad circumstances, so I'll show you what I mean about having some clear distance around the tree. So you can see there's a good bit of ground clearance. This is a Gloria Grand. I planted this in January of 2011, and it's grown extremely well. It's a beautiful tree, and Gloria Grand does grow well here on the farm. It seems to be cold tolerant, and just wanted to again show you that I try to keep a good amount of distance from the ground to the lowest branches for a number of positive reasons. Okay, now we just came in from the field from collecting a bunch of graft wood, and before I go in for the night, what I try to do is cut these down into about 10 or 12-inch sticks. And after I do that, I'll put these in a thick black plastic trash bag. I'll probably put a few paper towels in there that I'm gonna go ahead and dampen. You don't want your trash bag to have a lot of water in it because it will cause your grafting material to rot and decay. So I'm just going to cut these, and you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just going to cut that, and I've got a 5-gallon bucket beside me, and I'm just going to get these down to a more manageable amount. It's hard to handle these when they're too long, and it makes it really difficult to try to fit these into a trash bag because you'll end up breaking the buds off. Now once I get out into the field, even though I'm going to cut these at about 10 inches, when I actually perform my grafts, I'm going to cut these even further into smaller pieces. I don't want to do it now, but I'd probably cut this one in half right about there, and I've got 3 or 4 good buds on this piece, and that would make an ideal piece of material to graft a new canza with. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to sit out here for a few minutes before it gets too late and gets too dark, and just show you what I'm doing. I'm just cutting these into smaller pieces. Now some of these big chunky pieces that don't really have good buds on the bottom, as your tree grows, it's not going to have a lot of fresh buds on some of this older growth that's several years old. So this is not something that I can use for grafting, so that's going to be discarded. But what you're really looking for, and even on the tips will sometimes dry out or die in cold weather. We've had a really cold winter, and they don't really have the best buds, so I'll go ahead and cut those tips off. You can kind of see what I'm doing there. I don't really need that, but I'm going to hang on to that piece right there and put this piece in the bucket, and that, again, when I'm ready to do my grafting in just a few days, I can cut that one in half, and that one will make a really nice piece of grafting wood. So now while I was out there, I cut many pieces of material that I can use. So it's all different lengths, all different thicknesses, from about the size of a number 2 pencil, and some of them even a little bit bigger than that. But these all they're loaded with beautiful healthy buds. So what I'm going to do is just sit here for the next few minutes and cut these up into smaller pieces. See, we don't need that tip right there, so I'm just trying to push that out of the way. And boy, that's a nice looking piece of grafting material right there. We'll cut this one right in the middle, and we'll put that in the bucket. Again, we'll cut that tip off. I'm not going to use that tip. Trim off these really small pieces. We'll cut this one in half. You can see what we're doing there. Need 3 hands this afternoon. And that's how we collect our grafting wood and get it ready to store. Now, I have put this in the refrigerator before, but there is some risk in putting that in the refrigerator, because I have had years where the refrigerator got so cold that it froze. And if it does freeze your grafting wood, it's a pretty good chance it's going to kill the tissue that you need for grafting. So yeah, you can put it in the fridge, but just make sure you don't have a refrigerator that's going to make everything freeze. I've seen that happen before, and if that's the case, you might have a fairly unsuccessful grafting season, and you don't want that to happen. So we're just going to go through here and try to make quick work. I try to keep all of the buds pointed in the same direction, and you want those buds to be up when you graft, upward. You can see those buds, and if you don't have that going in the right direction, then you're probably going to have some problems. So you want those buds to be sticking up when you do your grafting. Okay, it's important to look at the condition of the wood that you've cut for grafting. Now, this is a piece that I'm not going to use, and I'm not sure if the camera is going to pick that up, but there's a lot of discoloration on here, and I can tell that this piece has dried out. It's got some dark spots on it, and just by holding this piece of wood, I can tell it's really thin. It's lightweight, so this one has some problems, and you want to be really careful and make sure that you pick only really good healthy material to use for your scions. There's a lot that can go wrong in the grafting process, and one of the things that you don't want to do is to start out with grafting wood that already has some problems. So you can see some of the dark spots on there, and it doesn't feel right. The weight is a little bit off, and we're going to set this one aside and try to find something better. For example, if you look at this piece, I can tell just by holding this, the weight of this one feels a lot heavier. And I can actually see the buds on there. They look really healthy. And if you just look at the stick itself, it's got a nice color to it. I don't see a bunch of lesions. I don't see a lot of really bad looking places on it. And sometimes they can be affected by extremely cold weather like we've had this past winter. So if you've got a part that's you can tell has been frozen really hard during the winter period and it's caused some tissue damage, that's really not something that you want to hang on to. So something like this is really beautiful, and again, I'll show you what the end of that looks like. And it's a little bit bigger than a number 2 pencil, but not quite as big around as a dime. But something like that's just going to make a lovely piece of grafting material. That's what you're looking for. Something right there. Okay, we're back out here in the orchard, and I told you that I would show you how I store these and get them ready for storage. But I've got a bucket here, and as I cut my graft wood, I just put it in this nice heavy-duty bucket, and it's quite a bit of material in here that I was able to collect recently. So I've got this down here in the bucket, and what I'm going to do is carefully take all of this out, and I'm going to get it together in a big bundle, and then I'm going to put it in a bag, and I'm going to close the bag, put a damp paper towel in there with it, and then I'm going to store this in a cool place out of direct sunlight. And I'm going to use this grafting material in the next 5 to 7 days. So you don't want this to sit around for too long. You want to get this grafted as quickly as possible. I did talk about making sure the bark is slipping on your rootstock, and I'm not sure if I'm going to put that in this video. It'll get kind of lengthy, but if you follow me closely, in the next, as soon as I can, I'll do a video of how a person can tell when the bark is slipping. And once the bark is slipping on your rootstock, then you're ready to go forward with your grafting process. So I'm going to carefully take these out. Now I've got a few paper towels, and I just came from in the house, and soaked this in some water. It's not dripping wet, it's just lightly damp. It's a little breezy out here, so it doesn't want to cooperate. But anyway, I'm going to take my scions out of the bucket. I'm going to wrap the base of my scions with this damp paper towel, and then I've got a bag here. I've got this heavy-duty bag, and this is actually a sand bag. We have a lot of tarps that we use to cover garden areas during the off-season, and I find that filling these sandbags with sand or pea gravel and then placing this on top of your tarps is a great way to hold it down. And we do have a lot of high wind out here, so these are really handy. But this happens to be a sandbag left over I did not use, so this will make a perfect place for me to store my scions until I'm ready to go out in the field and graft. So hang on just a second. I'm not trying to look away from the camera, but I'm going to need to for a minute so I can get these scions out of the bucket. So I'm going to lay these on top of the bag, and once I get them ready to go, we'll wrap the bases with this paper towel, and then we're going to very carefully slide all of this grafting material down into the bag. You do want to be careful as to not damage the buds, because if you knock all the buds off, then you won't have anything that's effective for grafting. So just wanted to show you that. You can see this one has a lot of nice big fat buds on there, and that's what you want when you get ready to go out in the field and graft. So we'll get this bagged up here, and now it's no telling how many pieces of wood I have, but it's at least 50. And what I'll do is, when I'm out in the field with my tools for grafting, I will look at the rootstock, and I'll determine the size of the rootstock, and then I'll go through all of these little sticks of grafting wood, and I'll find you want to find the piece of wood where the diameter of the wood, the thickness of the wood, is really close in size to your rootstock or your host, and that will improve your chances of grafting success. That's why I cut a lot of graft wood. I've got quite a bundle here in my hand, and again, you've got to be very careful. Wow, this is a pretty piece right here. I'm going to pull this one out. You can look at those beautiful buds right there on the end of that. Those are going to be really nice and healthy, and I suspect that'll be able to produce a really successful graft. Okay, so You don't have to really be too much focused on perfection with this, but this damp paper towel will help keep the bottom of these scions not wet but damp. And this is the sandbag I mentioned earlier. So I'm just going to pick these up. I'm going to be very careful, again trying to not damage any of those buds, and they all fit down in there really nicely. And then I'm just going to take this bag and twist the top of it up, and then I'll take this twist tie right here, which is built into the sandbags, and then I'll just cinch that up tight enough to keep everything safe in here. And pretty much that's what you end up with, is a package that looks like that. And again, that's got all of my grafting material in there that I'm going to use for this year. And we'll store that in a cool, dry place. And over the next 5 to 7 days, we're going to go out in the field and make some cuts and graft this, and hopefully we'll have another successful year.